Hello, everybody. Welcome to our scripture and sermon time. Actually, today's video is going to be pretty short. In our worship service, we're going to be reading a really long scripture passage. We're going to be doing a All Saints memorial service, communion. So we have a lot of other things going on in the service tomorrow. So the sermon portion is going to be shorter than usual. So we'll jump in. In worship, we're going to be reading all of John 11:1 to 44, which is the story of the raising of Lazarus. But I'll just kind of paraphrase it for you. So Jesus is away talking to, away doing his ministry when he gets word that his friend Lazarus has passed away. And Lazarus's sisters want Jesus to come and save him. But Jesus stays where he is for a couple days because he knows that it's going to be okay. So when he gets back to that town, the sisters are quite upset with Jesus, saying, if you were here, he wouldn't have died. And then Jesus is kind of it's all right, and then this is the story where Martha actually realizes who Jesus is, that Jesus is the Messiah. So Jesus goes to the tomb of Lazarus. Jesus actually weeps. There's a lot of different interpretations of why Jesus weeps. But then he tells Lazarus to come out of the tomb. And Lazarus does. He comes out of the tomb. He's alive. And Jesus says, unbind him and let him go. So we'll dig in a little bit more into the sermon now. So today we continue in our sermon series based on Amy Jo Levine's book, Signs and Wonders, about the miracles of Jesus. Now, in her book, she spends a lot of time really focusing on Mary and Martha and their grief and on their faith. Which we can dig into more in our Zoom Bible study this week, but I actually already preached a whole sermon on that in the past year, so I'm not going to do that with this sermon today, because I didn't kind of want to be redundant in our church. So since I preach from that perspective, I wanted to dig more into Amy Jo Levine's question of and then what? And I always love imagining and then what in these stories that we hear in the Bible. Jesus heals people, raises people, touches their hearts, saves them. Well, then what? Right? Lazarus has been dead for 4 days, we hear in our scripture story. 4 days. In the Jewish tradition at the time, they believed that the spirit stayed with the body for 3 days and then left to be with God on the 4th day. So not only is his body deceased, but his spirit would have already left by this point as well. So when Jesus shows up after Lazarus has been dead for 4 days, of course, understandably, his sisters are upset. If you would have come sooner, he would have been okay. But when Jesus shows up, he is raised. Lazarus is stumbling out of the tomb, given this second chance at life. And how many of us pray to God when a loved one died that it's not really true, right? That something can happen so that they can be with us again, right? How many of us continue to plead to God to somehow bring them back? And some people do have near-death experiences where they're dead for moments and come back, but most people, sadly, that's not the case, right? For most people, there's no bodily resurrection. And that grief is real and heavy for our survivors, right? And this is such a great scripture passage to really dig into that. But that's not what we're doing today. But Lazarus was raised, right? His sisters didn't have to mourn anymore like they were doing earlier in the story. So what next? What happened next? Now we do actually see them again in the Gospels when Mary anoints Jesus's feet with the expensive oil and praise and thanksgiving, right? Maybe that praise and thanksgiving is for raising her brother, right? Often when we've been given a second chance or a brush with death, we grab hold of that second chance and cherish it, right? Or we experience a loss and it shakes us up and wakes us up. What would you do with a second chance, a second lease on life? A couple of years ago, we had a couple unexpected young deaths in our family and friends, and it really woke us up. Many of us vowed to make changes in our lives, like spending more time with family, not taking life for granted, taking more time to really live and not like work ourselves to the bone, and so on. Like, it really just shook us up and made us not want to take life for granted, right? And I think some of those changes were not able to be sustained because the pandemic hit about 6 months later, unfortunately. And the pandemic really woke up a lot of people, right? But I think every now and then we do get woken up. I don't know what that moment was for you. Maybe we don't get literally raised from the dead, but some of us get shaken from our routines, raised from our ruts, right? To really take stock and make necessary changes. Has this ever happened to you? I'm sure it has, right? Sermons like this, maybe you hear them and you think that's nice. Maybe I'll finally do that thing that I've been meaning to do. And maybe if you hear that enough, maybe you will actually make a change. But I think more often than not, we need something to come along and shake us up, right? You know, our friend gets a heart attack, and so we finally start eating better and exercising and taking care of our bodies, right? Another friend attempts suicide, and we finally make that appointment with a therapist, right? A friend gets diagnosed with cancer, and we finally plan that lunch to see our friends that we have been meaning to do forever, right? A parent dies, and we finally make amends with an estranged sibling. We survive a serious illness, and we finally take that dream trip we've always wanted to take. We survive a car accident, and we vow to start going back to church. You get the idea, right? Something big often comes along, shakes us up, and makes us make those changes we've been meaning to make. Something major, maybe something tragic happens, and it wakes us up and causes us to make those positive changes in our lives. We realize life is more fragile than we thought, right? We aren't guaranteed tomorrow, and neither are our loved ones. And it really causes us to look at our lives, figure out what's truly important, right? I think that can be one of the so what's of this story, right? Like, we read these stories and we ask, like, so what? So that could be one of the so what's of the story, right? Lazarus, Mary, Martha, they're given a second chance. So what do they do with it, right? If we were given a second chance, what would we do with it? Think about that this week. This is a week we typically think about those who have passed on, right? And that's important. With All Saints on Halloween, we think about the people that we have lost. But what a gift to them if you lived your life, truly lived your life, right? Yesterday I did a funeral for one of my former parishioners, and I ended the service a way I have never ended a service before. At the end, I said, keep his memory alive. Tell the stories, share your memories, be generous, over-tip, make others feel welcome, root for the Phillies and Eagles, chase after your passions, live life to the fullest, be the best kind of person you can be. Remember all the love that he shared and shine your light like he did in his life. That's how you keep his memory alive. Right? So, how can we honor our loved ones who've passed on with the life that we have left? How do we glorify God with the lives that we have been gifted, right? That's a great way to keep people's memories alive, is to do things to honor their memories, to really live our lives and be the best version of ourselves that we can be, right? So dream big. Every day we wake up is another chance in life. It's a gift that has been given to us. Use it, enjoy it, cherish it, and let all the glory be to God.